Alfred, Lucy Powell, welcome to the programme. What taxes would Labour raise to cut the deficit?
Well, we've said that we will reintroduce the 50p top rate of tax for the very highest earners to pay down the deficit. But as you heard from that clip there, this is a three-pronged strategy in terms of getting the deficit.
I'm going to do all prongs, so let us stick with tax rises. But
I think it's really important to have the context.
What other taxes would you increase?
Well, as I was just going to go on to say, if you could just let me finish the first point, was the 50p top rate of tax will go up. We'll have sensible spending reductions in the unprotected departments, and we've set out many of those. And I'm coming on to the third point, Andrew, which goes directly to your point, which is that the way that we will get the deficit down, the way that the Tories have failed to get the deficit down, is by ensuring that people across society, that everybody and hard-working, ordinary families have got the tax receipts coming into the Exchequer because they are on decent paid proper jobs and they're not drawing down on welfare as we have seen under the Tories. It's about increasing the tax receipts across base.
I'm asking about specific tax rises. Are you telling me this morning that the only tax you will need to increase to reduce the deficit is the top rate of 50p?
That's the tax, the only tax that we have set out that we will be increasing.
And according
but we are very clear that what we can do is increase the tax base. That is what has happened, not happened under the Tories.
Right.
They said they would eliminate the deficit by the end of this Parliament. They haven't. They've not even really halved it. And why has that happened? Because you've seen a huge increase in the number of people on 0 hours contract, on low pay. The minimum wage hasn't kept. It's really important. If you just let me finish. If you just let me finish.
It would be useful if you answer the questions and we'll get to all that. Are you telling me that the only tax you will raise will be the top rate, a tax which the IFS says could bring in between nothing and £2 billion?
Let's see what it brings in. Let's see what it brings in. But the critical point here is that we have seen working families across the country having to rely on housing benefit, on tax credits, instead of paying into the Exchequer because they are worse off. People are £1,600 a year worse off. Wages have stagnated and the cost of living has risen. Rents have risen. So we've seen a 60% increase in the number of people who are in work claiming housing benefit. The economy is not working, and that is why the deficit has not been eliminated. And it's an absolutely critical point.
Let's move on then let's try and get down though to some details instead of general aspiration.
No, it's not a general aspiration.
So you're only going to increase taxes, one tax, and that's a tax that could increase revenues by zero. So let's look at spending cuts, because that seems you're going to have to depend more on them.
That's your interpretation of the 50p tax rate.
No, it's the IFS's interpretation, Lucy Powell. It's not my interpretation. What cuts would you make to reduce the deficit?
We've set out a number of cuts. I mean, we'll obviously have to see what the books are like when we get into Parliament, but we have said things like, for example, that we will reduce the winter fuel payments to the very richest pensioners, those pensioners who earn over £42,000 a year. We will freeze only have child benefit increasing by 1% a year. We will freeze ministerial pay, for example, and cut ministerial pay. And also, very critically, we've gone through a very robust and rigorous process of our zero-based spending reviews across every single government department, where we've identified a number of savings that we can make in those departments. So, for example, in the Home Office, we've identified £250 million worth of savings there. In the local government budget, £500 million worth of savings there that we think we can get by back office sharing. In the education department, there's a huge amount of savings to be made from the free school programme, for example. So we've gone through that process, and I think the critical thing here is that the Tories haven't gone through that process.
Let me stick with you, because we've looked at these, and we've looked at your zero-based budgeting approach as well, and with the best will in the world, it's hard to find more than £1 billion worth of cuts that can be used to pay for the deficit. For example, your child benefit cap is already factored into government forecasts of spending and revenues. So you don't get 400 million. We cannot find anything more than £1 billion when you add up everything you've just said Can you tell us any more cuts this morning?
It does add up to more than £1 billion.
How much?
It does add up to more than £1 billion.
How much?
There is 11 zero-based spending reviews we've already published. There are several more still to come.
How much does it add up?
There are still bigger departments still to come. I haven't added them up here, but it's more than that. We have said that we will reduce the deficit year on year and that we will balance the books as soon as possible in the next Parliament, but certainly by the end. Now, the critical thing here, Andrew, I think that people will want to understand, rather than this sort of Paxo-style interview, the critical thing here is that the Conservative Party spending plans are much, much deeper and much greater than ours,
and
that they will be deeper.
Well, no, I am.
Yes, but I am. But I am. No, but I am.
But that's not the subject of my
interview. If you just let me finish the point.
Like Mr. Miliband, you don't get to ask your own questions.
Okay,
I
I'm
get
going
to
finish
ask
the
questions, and you answer them. I would like to point out to you, Lucy Powell, that this morning, all you have told us in terms of deficit reduction is that you would have one tax rise which could bring in nothing, and so far spending cuts that barely come to £1 billion. Add these two together, that is not a credible deficit reduction package.
No, it isn't what I've said to you this morning, Andrew, because you aren't listening to what I'm saying. I've said to you there are 3 prongs to our strategy for deficit reduction, and I'll rehearse those again for you now, if you like. That we will have fair tax rises for those with the broadest shoulders, including the reintroduction of the 50p tax rate. We will have sensible spending cuts across other departments, those that I have set out and others that are still to come. And thirdly, and most critically, this is absolutely why the Tories have failed to reduce the deficit, we will get ordinary working families paying taxes in and not having to draw down on the welfare state, because we've seen a huge proliferation of people who are in work having to claim benefits. They are on insecure, 0 hours, low paid jobs that they
How many people are on 0 hour contracts? How many people are in 0 hour contracts?
Over 800,000.
Well, it's 700,000 actually, of which a third don't want to work any more hours, and 17% are students. So how would getting them off 0 hour contracts result in an avalanche of new tax revenues?
It's a critical issue. It's across the board.
To the question?
Yeah, I'm answering the question. If you just let me speak, Andrew, this is really annoying.
You've had plenty of time to speak.
Yeah, I'm now actually going to speak. You know, in the real world, Andrew, where I live, okay, unlike where you live and many other people in the media.
You have no idea where I live. Just answer the question.
In the real world where I live, I meet constituents the entire time. I know family and friends the entire time who are on 0 hours contracts or insecure short-term contracts. There are many other contracts outside 0 hours that are insecure, low pay and are short-term, who go from job to job without any security. They are having to have their wages topped up by the state. Housing benefit, rents have gone through the roof.
Are you going to abolish 0 hour contracts?
We have said that we will, yes, we will be banning exploitative 0 hours contracts.
Oh, no. Are you going to abolish 0 hour contracts outright?
No, we said that if you are in a regular job, if you are working in a regular job, you will have the right to have a regular contract. So in a small few situations, 0 hours contracts worse. But what we have seen
a third of people on them like them and want them.
We have seen an explosion in 0 hours contracts under this government, no question, and we can see that in the we can see that
I'm sorry, the last time you
in the workplace.
The last time you said that, the Office for National Statistics had to draw you up and say the figures show no explosion in 0 hour on people on 0 hours contracts.
Fourfold. They've gone up fourfold in this Parliament.
Some with the same. Some with the actual number of people on 0 hour contracts has not gone up fourfold at all.
The number of 0 hours contracts has gone up fourfold in this Parliament.
The number of people on them has not.
And it's what we all see in our constituents. It's what we see in workplaces. And the critical thing is, if you ask the IFS, you ask any independent economist, they will tell you that the reason why the deficit has not been eliminated, as the Tories said it would be, is because they haven't had the tax receipts coming in from ordinary, hard-working families. In fact, at the other end of the ledger, what has happened under this government is that you have seen the welfare bill, despite all their pernicious policies, the bedroom tax and taking benefits off the disabled and getting rid of crisis loans and all those nasty, nasty policies that they brought in, despite all of that, the welfare bill under this government is actually £25 billion higher than they said it would be. That is why they have not reduced the deficit.
Can I ask you this, since we're talking about deficit reduction? If you make the changes that you want to 0 hours contracts, how much extra tax revenue will that bring in?
I haven't got those figures in front of me. I'm
well,
not sure that we've worked that out. This is going to be a process over time. This is going to be a process over time. We will inherit a £75 billion deficit, and we have said that by the end of the Parliament, if not sooner, we will have balanced the books.
Doesn't it
and it will
follow,
be across these range of areas that we will do that.
So doesn't it follow, even if you get some extra growth in the economy, though, the current tax projections assume growth of at least 2.5%. Even if you were to get more, given what you've told us this morning, it is inconceivable that you would not have to borrow billions and billions more. And that's what you would do. You would borrow more, wouldn't you?
No, our manifesto commitments will require no extra borrowing. They are all fully funded, unlike the Conservative Party, who have got £10 billion of unfunded tax cuts.
I'm not talking about money for spending. I'm talking to bridge the deficit. You will have to borrow more. You're going to borrow £30 billion a year simply to pay for public investment. That's part of what you're going to do, correct?
We're going to balance the books by the current expenditure by the end of the Parliament.
And borrow £30 billion a year for public investment.
We may use some investment borrowing for much needed investment, but not for day-to-day
No, I understand. So that's another £30 billion a year you will borrow for investment, correct?
I don't know those figures. It depends on what the books are like when we inherit.
OBR. Public investment is 30 billion a year.
I think those figures are other people's figures. No. We will see the books when we get them, but we've been absolutely clear about what we intend to do, and that is to bring the deficit down to zero by the end of the Parliament.
Lucy Powell, thank you very much for joining us from Salford this morning. Now, the campaign officially